Rights Act and the important work our agencies do every day to promote freedom from discrimination across our state. Today's Fireside Chat will be a terrific discussion with outstanding people who have led the charge to advance human rights in Illinois. We appreciate you being here to celebrate this important occasion with us. And now it is my pleasure to introduce the moderator for today's program, Sufyan Sohel, who serves as chair of the Cook County Commission on Human Rights. He will introduce our esteemed panelists today. Sufyan, over to you.
Thank you so much, Barbara. Good afternoon. My name is Sufyan Sohel, and I'm so pleased to be here with each of you today. December 10th, 2023, it marks the 75th anniversary of one of the world's most groundbreaking global pledges, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This landmark document enshrined the inalienable rights that everyone is entitled to as a human being, regardless of race, color, religion, sex, language, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or other status. This declaration was proclaimed by the UN General Assembly in Paris on December 10th, 1948, and sets out for the first time fundamental human rights to be universally protected. Over the last 40 years, Illinois has added anti-discrimination protections that cover anyone who lives, works, or visits the state. Given the current humanitarian crisis that we're seeing all around the world, it is now more important than ever that we prioritize responding to and preventing discrimination. I'm so pleased for our incredible panel that we have today. We have Director Jim Bennett, who's the director of the Illinois Department of Human Rights, where he is responsible for overseeing the agency's primary mission to secure for all individuals in the state of Illinois freedom from unlawful discrimination and to establish and promote equal opportunity and affirmative action as the policy of this state for all of its residents. Director Bennett also serves as the chair of the Illinois Commission on Discrimination and Hate Crimes, to which he was appointed to in 2021 by Governor Pritzker. He previously served as the Midwest Regional Director of Lambda Legal, the nation's largest legal organization, dedicated to securing the full civil rights of the LGBTQ community and people with HIV. And as a result of his leadership, Illinois led the way in recognizing the freedom to marry for same-sex couples and in standing firm against efforts to roll back anti-discrimination laws. His integrity and commitment to justice make him the perfect fit to lead this agency, which is charged with enforcing Illinois' laws, ensuring fair treatment for all. I've always been so inspired by Director Bennett's leadership, and I'm so excited he is here to share his insights with us. We also have with us Chair and Commissioner Mona Noriega. Chair Noriega was appointed to the commission by Governor Pritzker in June of 2021. She previously served as the commissioner and board chair of the City of Chicago's Commission on Human Relations. She helped open the Midwest Regional Office of Lambda Legal Defense, which advances the civil rights of lesbians, gay men, bisexuals, transgendered, and people living with HIV and AIDS. And later, she served as its Midwest Regional Director. I had the pleasure of working with Chair Noriega when she was at the city. After the 2016 Pulse nightclub shooting, she led efforts to bring together members of the Muslim, LGBTQ, and Spanish-speaking communities to strengthen our ties and build community, many of those relationships remain strong today. A passionate advocate for the rights of all, and someone whom I personally looked up to and leaned upon, I'm so pleased to have her with us today.
Thank you.
And our last, pardon me?
Thank you.
And our last, of course. And our last speaker, and certainly not least, is Joyce Tucker. Ms. Tucker was the inaugural director of the Illinois Department of Human Rights and the first Black woman to serve in Governor Thompson's cabinet. Yes, the Governor Thompson, the namesake of the recently sold large building on Randolph Street, he appointed Ms. Tucker after her years of service as a mental health specialist, leading equal employment opportunity and affirmative action programs at the Illinois Department of Mental Health and as the acting director for the Illinois Department of Equal Employment Opportunity. She was also appointed to the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission by President George H.W. Bush in 1990 and to the White House Initiative Advisory Board for Historically Black Colleges and Universities by George W. Bush in 2011. Ms. Tucker began her own EEO management company, Tucker Spearman and Associates, in 1997, and since 2002 has been Vice President of Global Diversity and Employee Rights for the Boeing Company. Just reading her bio and her path, just so impressed to her lifelong commitment to promote equity initiatives, and I'm thrilled to share this space with her as she shares her wisdom with us all today. We're going to break apart our conversation today into three sections. We're going to do first focus on the evolution of human rights over the last 40 years in our state. Then we'll move on to what it looks like to ensure justice, access, and equity for all. And then we'll move over to what the future looks like of human rights and anti-discrimination protections. So if the speakers are ready, I will start with a very easy question. Joyce, can you provide context of what the evolution of human rights over the last 40 years in Illinois has looked like? What was happening in the 70s and 80s that led to the creation of two state agencies that investigate and adjudicate anti-discrimination cases?
Thank you. I am delighted to be here, of course, and anytime I hear about what's going on with my agency, it just makes me smile. So I'm proud of everything that you guys are doing right now. As you may know, the challenge to come up with a comprehensive enforcement and administrative agency has been long and challenging. We can look back to 1969 when Governor Kerner passed the Fair Employment Practices Act. And between that time and 1979, when the Human Rights Act was passed, there have been several efforts to come up with civil rights laws to help enforce and strengthen affirmative action and EEO in the state. When the Human Rights Act was passed, there were like 11 different statutes. They were in different places. They were not managed in a comprehensive way. And in the agencies that they were managed in, they weren't managed all that well. So a couple of things came to pass. The governor created the Cost Control Task Force, and they had the responsibility of looking at all of the agencies to see whether or not there could be efficiency and whether or not those agencies could work better. And one of the things that the task force recommended was that the three existing agencies that were involved in civil rights activities, the Fair Employment Practices Commission, the Illinois Commission on Human Relations, and the Department of Equal and Opportunity, which I was the acting director at that time, be merged. At the exact same time, the Bakke decision was rendered, and there was a conference, a national conference that was held by Operation Push, now Rainbow Push, which it was headed at that time by Reverend Jesse Jackson. At that conference, they committed to strong and effective affirmative action practices in the states where they resided. So you've got the Cost Control Task Force, something has to be done. You've got the Black legislators, we want to do something. And working with the governor and advocacy groups across the state, they came up with the Illinois Human Rights Act. They strengthened the act. They gave it more resources. At that time, it was budgeted for $4 million, which was a big deal, and which was about 30% higher than the combined agencies' budgets at that time. They created the Illinois Department of Human Rights, which was the enforcement piece. And they created the Human Rights Agency Commission, which was the bipartisan entity that was the adjudicative wing. And they wanted that to be bipartisan, and they wanted people to be able to appeal to that entity and have their charges reviewed. And it was great. It was a great process because people felt like there were no politics going on because the commission was bipartisan. So that's the background, short background. But if you really want to know the context, then I recommend you look at the documentary Eyes on the Prize, because you have to go back to the civil rights movement to really understand the context of the 70s and the 80s.
Thank you so much. That was been just so trying to process that history lesson. What I would also love to hear is what was your experiences as a Black woman in this leadership position?
Okay. It was challenging to say the least. And what you have to understand also is that it was a challenge to get the Human Rights Act passed. It was no walk in the park. There were people who were supportive, and I would have to give commendations to Senator Harold Washington, who really much was the leader of the Black senators that supported the effort. And their belief was it looks good to us. We had something to do with the crafting of it. It's good. And we want to help make sure that it's passed. But there were a group of people in the House that really didn't want this legislation to pass. It was sort of like, well, human rights is a Democratic issue here. You have this Republican coming out here creating this law. And Harold Washington's position was, I don't care who's doing it. If it's good, I'm going to support it. So you've got individuals fighting about the creation of this act. Here I am, the director, and I took the brunt of a lot of those issues. I mean, you're in the job. We're going to fight the governor, but we're going to fight you too. There was also a group of individuals who said, this job with the money, at that time, $44,000 was a lot of money. That should go to a man and not a woman. So I'm fighting that issue. I'm also fighting you're young, looking younger than I was. I wish I could say that now. And you're female. So young, female, Black were the issues that I had to fight with. And that continued, I think. There were people with long memories. So when I would go in front of the House, not so bad in the Senate, for the budget hearings, I had a hard time. Tell you one story. There was a conference committee, they met together and they tried to decide we're going to work out the issues in your budget. And they met all around. So I'm chasing them, trying to have an opportunity to be involved. One time they met in the men's room. I was determined to get in there. And thank goodness one of the senators who was very supportive of the department caught me by my skirt tail and just said, no, don't worry about it. I'll take care of this for you. But it was a challenge from the beginning to end. In passing the legislation, 90 amendments were put on the legislation by the House, 90. The Senate approved only 8. So lots of things were done. Information was sent out that wasn't accurate. We had to have fact sheets. But that's what I had to deal with as a director. I think my youth helped a lot because I didn't know how bad a situation I was in. But we worked through it and we ended up getting the support that we needed with Harold, with the governor, with the advocacy groups. It was a headache, but it was something that I would never change. We had lots of support and we had talented people in the agency that made things happen.
And you were able to bring so much needed change and improvement to the state. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Of course. Mona, the next question is for you. What impact, in your perspective, did the passage of the Illinois Human Rights Act and the creation of the department and the commission have on your work to advance civil rights of members of the LGBTQ plus community?
Well, I want to kind of build on what Joyce talked about. And she talked about the long history of how the department and the commission were created. And she talked about fact sheets, which when I think about it, I think about so much misinformation right now that is going out around all. And so fact sheets then, bots and false accounts, spinning lies and creating division and inaccuracies around our many marginalized communities. And then the identities, that is still an issue. That is still an issue. You know, the protections for based on queer identity really began, even though it was passed maybe in 2005. It was originally submitted, I think, in the 70s. And so it took many years, multi generations, and decades to actually get it passed. And so when you refer to the long history of just creating the commission and the department, we have to remember that none of these things came easily. And every step of the way for any kind of social change was built with a lot of sweat and tears and crying, you know. And, you know, Joyce, you modeled, you know, how to just plow right through it. And I think there were many activists who had to look up to what you did to continue the movement of all kind of civil rights protections. When we received when our government recognized that queer people were deserving of protections as well, it was affirming to the community. It was an opportunity to grow politically. It was an opportunity to claim our right and of responsibilities to participate in the social fabric. You know, queer people were always a part of building the many social institutions that we participate in. But to be able to do so openly, I think it really energized people, and it allowed us to live a freer life, so that we did not have to integrate some of the negative messages. It allowed us to work, to live in our homes, to begin to demand familial rights, second parent adoption, marriage. All those things were actually pie in the sky. And so although perhaps initial legislation for protection began in the 70s, we didn't get it until the 2000s. It was just a continuous fight for our rights. And I have to say that none of those are guaranteed right now. The complaints that the department currently receives are still around employment. The complaints are based on race and sexual orientation and religion. They're based on all the things that we fought for, and we must continue to fight for. So, you know, I am forever grateful for people like Joyce who stood up despite all the attacks, and, you know, and for Director Bennett as well, for standing up and taking those hits. So thank you. I don't know if I answered your question. I just went off on a tangent. But ask me another question if I didn't ask you your question.
Oh, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
All three of you are such incredible pioneers and pillars of this work. And it's just so good to hear everything you're sharing. You know, I'm resonating a little bit with, you know, what you're talking about, how long it's taken for some of these protections to come in place. I know at the county level, for example, things like ethnicity and caste, bodily autonomy are things that are just going to be new protections in 2024. And, you know, thinking back, I'm like, these weren't protected already. You know, and it sounds like bizarre to realize that some of these things are not protections. And I think my next question for you, Mona, are what are some of those lesser known protections of the Human Rights Act, which the public may not be aware of, but they should be?
Well, you know, most people don't realize that sexual harassment or retaliation are protected. And of course, the Crown Act, most recently around hair that is used to discriminate, particularly around African Americans. I would actually point to, well, the other things are the criminal history protections that we have currently. as a way to make sure that people who have served their time are able to reintegrate back into society. They really experience unfair discrimination, but I would, I would have to say most all the discriminations that are currently illegal are unfair. Um, I would say that many people don't understand their full rights, and that the many identities that we live with are protected, and that sometimes as we begin to unpeel the onion, we recognize how there are additional protections. And so you discuss case and the Crown Act, and I think that we can still go further.
Thank you. I agree. And from my experience, I also feel it's often the most impacted communities that often don't realize what rights that they have, and can we collectively go out there and, educate, inform, and support them as well.
Exactly. And most often our marginalized communities that are experiencing the discrimination, the first thing is to be able to talk about it.
Mhm.
And oftentimes we don't have words for what it is, nor do we understand sometimes the difference between what's actionable and what's not actionable. And so it's really incumbent on all of us to make sure that our civil rights and our demand for them stay at the forefront.
Agreed. Thank you. Jim, when did you first learn about the Illinois Human Rights Act and its comprehensive protections?
I mean, Mona gave me the perfect segment, because even though I was somewhat aware of it, it wasn't till I moved to Chicago and became part of the gay rights fight, or LGBT rights fight, because I just didn't even think I could get rights. I had just sort of accepted it. So I had worked when I lived in Peoria before. I grew up downstate, and when I came out at my employers, and I was on a fast track, for senior management, and when I came out, they said, "Well, you're going to need to move to Chicago." Like, like you've gone as far as you're going to go here. And it also wasn't malicious or mean. It was just sort of like, this is just as far as you can go, as if you're going to be gay. And my first sort of real job in Chicago was at the Shriver Center, the Sergeant Shriver Center on Poverty Law, and they sent cases to the department. So I should say, with Joyce, it is a rare thing when a government employee is seen as a leader sort of in the activist world, or an advocate. And so to know Joyce, like, and to learn of her even then was I mean, I think that's just extraordinarily unusual. So we would send cases where we could not make an impact. So the Shriver Center would take cases to help people out of poverty. And so oftentimes, since laws were established in Illinois, they could refer cases to the Department of Human Rights. But it's when I went to Lambda Legal, and they were towards the end of the fight. I followed Mona, so she was a mentor for me, and so I was at the tail end. The 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 passing of adding sexual orientation was unusual, because there were times where they could have gotten it passed earlier, and they didn't, because it didn't include the trans community. And no one, I think there's only one other state that provided any kind of protection for the trans community. And the LGBT community in Chicago and Illinois said, we're not moving forward till this is a full comprehensive protection. So it was incredibly bold, because no one had really taken this fight on in the same way. And then it was humbling to be like, I'm covered now. Like, like to be able to fight for your own rights. And the other thing about I think what Joyce created, and what I think many of the movements that have expanded the act over the last 45 years has been like, we do not take a step back. We do not harm another community when we take an advance. So when we were trying to pass marriage, one of the compromises that was being pushed by some conservative lawmakers and groups was, well, we'll go ahead and work on getting marriage protections, but we want exemptions then for women, or we want exemptions on reproductive rights. And the LGBT community, along with Rocco Claps, who was the director of the department at the time, was like, we're not making compromises in civil rights. We're not taking one group back so another group can move forward. And I credit Joyce and the many directors after that have just taken this very strong stand regardless of party. But that was really when it came alive to me.
Thank you so much. We're going to segue into our next section, ensuring justice, access, and equity for all. And this is for all of you. What can we do to ensure that marginalized groups continue to have equitable access to justice? Let me start with Joyce.
I think the first thing that we can do is share the information. What's going on? How can you protect your rights? We did a lot of visiting churches. And for the Hispanic community, that was great access. Whether there were 2 people there for the meeting, or 1 person there, 10 people there, we shared the information. We held meetings around the state, giving people information that they could share with their communities. Because we are in a very challenging time right now. There is a hard push back on our rights, all of our rights. There's pushing into changing the books that the kids have in their schools, rewriting the history of civil rights, leaving some things out that's very important for kids to understand. If they need to understand why they need to move forward, they need to know why they need to move forward. And if you take all this information out of the books, then the knowledge will not be there. If you don't know the past, you can repeat the past. So we have to make sure that people understand the history of this country as it relates to groups and why they need the protection. What we also need is that persistent, unrelenting push forward by people who are committed to these causes. As long as those groups are quiet, and there appears to be some level of quietness now. I'm not hearing the things that we heard when things were moving forward. So what each of us have to do is talk to those people, give them the information, encourage them to move forward, encourage them to vote. If the dog catcher is on the ballot in my community, I'm there voting, because it's important that I vote. Along with the dog catcher might be somebody else that's going to have significant impact on my life. So we have to get more energized. We have to get more informed. And all of us and the organizations that we belong to have a responsibility to do that.
Yeah, I agree. I think the other thing too is that when we are going out, so at the commission, we are really trying to do a lot of outreach. And so we will go anywhere anybody invites us to go. We will go and talk. But in addition, we also have to recognize our common humanity. And I think that all the marginalized groups, it's like a Venn diagram. We are in all of them. All the religious groups, all of them have each of us, however you identify, in them. And it's really important that we recognize our commonalities and build on that. And so when we go out to groups, I think it's important that we listen. It's not just about telling people their rights. It absolutely is, but it's also about listening, because each of our marginalized communities experiences discrimination and hate differently. And then recognize that the past, as you say, Joyce, repeats itself, but in different communities. And that to me has been the most heartbreaking part of the listening tours that the Discrimination and Hate Crimes Commission has been conducting, is that when we go into different communities, I'm hearing a repeat of issues from a different community. And it's just wrong. It's just wrong. But we are doing our best to get out there. We are doing our best to get out there in multiple languages. And so I would encourage anybody to invite us out, but also for each of us individually to be sure that when we hear discriminatory jokes, innuendos, comments, that we be bold. And I know it's really hard. I know it's hard, but gently, perhaps guide them into a different way to understand that discriminatory comments have an effect on all of us. Mm-hmm. All of us. They're all connected.
And to Mona's point, that what's interesting is, like, especially as we've been out talking to more groups, Arab American or the MENA community or the Jewish community, some of the issues they're finding are almost exactly the same. So in schools, you know, at one school, we had a young woman who was told she couldn't wear her headscarf, her the face covering. A Jewish boy was told he couldn't wear his yarmulke, and we're like, these are public schools, like, you know, I mean, so you have protections and rights, and sometimes it's not done in a malicious way. It's like, oh, this might be upsetting for you. You might be in an uncomfortable position, so you maybe just blend in, just fit in. That's not who we are as a country, you know. And so to be able to get out and then I think, you know, to get back to your question, one of the things that's incumbent on us to do in these amazing positions we have the privilege to serve in is to make sure that the people that we're talking about are around the table. Like, I mean, I think of one of the first meetings where we were talking about the Crown Act, and there was no one Black. Like, I mean, it was insane. And so it's like, you know, I mean, the you know, the department is extraordinarily diverse. I'm thankful. And again, like, you know, we're union driven. It doesn't happen overnight. Like, but we're 30% African American, we're 30% white, we're 30% Latino. Like, it's and it's through all levels, but that has to be consciously built and consciously protected, and to make sure that when someone's rights are being discussed, you know, we need to make sure they're there. And it's never an excuse that it's too hard to do, or that we're asking for too much. Like, if you're not equal, you're not equal. Like, you have to demand those rights, and it's uncomfortable for people. And it's like the fight for marriage is a perfect example where, you know, the compromise was to create civil unions. Well, you know, what even is a civil union? No one could explain it. Anyone could understand a marriage. You may hate it, but you understood what we were asking for. Like, so, you know, demand everything. You know, I mean, that's what our job is to do.
And I think what I'm hearing from Jim and Mona is we have to work together.
Yeah.
You know, so the individual organizations have to work together, and they did in the civil rights movement. And if we're going to make sure that our rights are protected and people are coming after our rights, we have to work together. And it reminds me of the King quote when he said, we're all caught up in an inescapable network of mutuality. Whatever impacts one directly impacts all of us indirectly. Mm-hmm. And that's the message. And we have to understand that. And if we work collectively, then I think we can get more done.
Agreed.
I really appreciate everything each of you said, and it resonates a lot with me in terms of, you know, in my work, both as a civil rights attorney and in the commission, it's reminding communities that, especially immigrant communities, that we're all here on the backs of so many other communities that came before us to this country and struggled, and whether it be the forced migration of Africans to America, or the removal of indigenous communities from their ancestral lands, and all of the hate that all these communities faced. And hate's not new to the community. Even like, we take the pandemic, for example, where we saw a rise of anti-Asian hate. And a lot of people thought that this is the first time Asians are facing hate, and not realizing we interned Japanese Americans on our soil, and a Chinese Exclusion Act, and the travel ban, and all of these different things that we saw. And it's becoming, I think, sometimes a competition of who's experiencing hate the most internally as communities rather than, hey, we're all experiencing this. We should be standing up for each other because no one deserves to be facing hate based on how they identify. And we need to be better at supporting each other is what I'm hearing. But I'm also hearing from Mona what you said, the importance of words and how we don't often realize the deep impact words may have and the way we say. And I often share this example in law school. I was in law school when bin Laden was killed by the US government. And I had friends joke like, hey, Sufyan, we killed your Uncle Osama this past weekend. And by no means do they mean it maliciously, but they didn't realize like, hey, you're really otherizing me with some of those comments. You don't see me as part of this country. You see me as a foreigner because you're making these associations. And what we realize is that if words go unchecked, they can often spiral into more egregious acts of hate. And we just have to be much better about the way we treat each other, the love, the compassion, the dignity we show to one another. So I just really appreciate the perspectives you provided.
And Susie, and rather than that competition of harm, I think we have to begin from a place of love and healing.
100%. And I don't think that's being done enough. And I would, always looking for ways that, and that's why I want to mention again what we did after the Pulse nightclub shooting is, really bring people together to heal together. And as we were all different groups were targeted, and just to be in the same space and shared space and find community and love and food and drinks and enjoy and learn from one another and realize how much more similar we all are.
And in organizing those visuals, we were very, very careful to be sure that no one group was otherized.
Yeah.
And so initially, perhaps maybe they wanted to just have a Christian faith people present. And in organizing those, our collective, we wanted to be sure that none of us were otherwise and that we were all suffering the harm of that particular violence. And it takes multiple perspectives and to take a deep breath and to figure out where our commonality is in and recognize that we are all trying to achieve the same peace and eradication of the harm of any of our communities.
No, definitely.
You recognize in Illinois, when you're in Illinois, you're covered. So the Venezuelans that are at the Broadway Armory by me, they are fully covered by this act. They enjoy the full protections. And all you have to do is look back on like our state's history or Chicago's history. I walk by that armory every day and I think, who's going to be the first kid who's going to be a state senator? Who's going to be the first kid who's going to be our U.S. congressperson? We're watching it now in the Latino and the Asian communities as different groups come into their power, and you can look back not too far in our history to see that it was the Irish Catholics before that, and we have the Ukrainian village. Like our city and our state is extraordinary, and to find that common thread of humanity that Mona discusses, and how that's where we find hope in these hard times.
Thank you. And I appreciate you helped segue into our next section of what the future looks like.
Accident.
And so what do you all think is going to be the next challenge that we face, either like community wise or collectively in the fight against discrimination?
If I was to start, I would say it's the Supreme Court. We have a dangerous, in my opinion, a dangerous Supreme Court that doesn't value civil rights as certainly as we understand in Illinois, as the Pritzker administration understands, as case law for decades understands. So to watch affirmative action gutted, to have Creative 303, which is the case that for the first time has told businesses you can legally discriminate against lesbians and gays, in a a trumped up case, every sense of the word. And so to me, the responsibility of Illinois and our department in particular, along with the commission and the attorney general's office in Illinois, is to when these decisions that seek to divide and harm communities across the country, when these decisions happen, our job is to narrow that decision as much as we can, using the Illinois Human Rights Act as the foundation. So, if people feel that they've been discriminated against, or they felt like they weren't served, for example, in because of their identity or who they love, file a case with us. We'll investigate that case. Let us determine if they're standing, if this is legal. Let it go to the Commission on Human Rights. The Human Rights Commission has an extraordinary power of being able to create case law within this state. And so but nothing, I'm a little terrified about the next election, and what happens if we were to lose our democracy. I don't take that lightly at all. But this Supreme Court is a threat to how we understand human rights, both in Illinois and the country.
And I think, following up on what Jim said, in Illinois, we're in a better place than a lot of states. We've got the commitment from high up, and we've got an organization, Department of Human Rights, that has some pretty strong laws. And from when I was the director, when we compared our state laws to other states, we were ahead of them. We were even ahead of the EEOC in terms of the protections against people with disabilities. I was able to bring many years of knowledge as we crafted the regulations for the ADA. So we're good here. We've learned something. I think we have a responsibility as people who live in Illinois to make sure that that stays strong, and that we are advocates, and we continue to be committed, and we continue to share the information. But we also have to do some pushing in terms of letting people know, families, to the extent that we're not violating any laws, for those of you who work for government, to know that voting is essential, which is why in the civil rights movement, a lot of effort was spent to get people to be able to vote and encourage people to vote. The reason why we do so well is because who's in office. So we've got to make sure that the people the people who we need to move forward, they're the right folks. And they're the people who are committed to the advancement of civil rights for all, for everyone. And if that doesn't happen, then we're going to have various courts, in addition to the Supreme Court, which was the court that we looked at to support the issues that were important to us. Landmark cases supporting civil rights came out of the Supreme Court. It's not happening now.
Landmark cases are coming out, but they're not
supporting.
They should be headed.
Right.
Right. So I think I so agree that I feel that there's a total threat to democracy right now. And we're seeing that in some of the court cases that are coming out. And we're also seeing it in politicians who are running for office that openly say that they will not abide by the law. And the instigation of violence, and then using your word, Sufyan, othering communities. So the threat to democracy is I'm most concerned about. I'm afraid of that. I'm afraid of dismantling of the religious protections, or as I think my colleague said, I forgot the word she used, but misapplying the religious protections. And so here in the state of Illinois, we do have very strong protections. And as long as we can receive those complaints, investigate them, and further reinforce the idea that we have these protections in the state of Illinois, then I think that we continue to create a harbor of safety here in the state of Illinois. But it requires all of us to be engaged in what it means to safeguard democracy. And a lot of that stems from voting. Voting your heart. Get out there and vote. Get out there and talk, and be responsible. Be a responsible, engaged citizen.
Joyce had brought up the act and how it's been ahead of EEOC, and we're also so we are equivalent to EEOC and HUD. So so those cases also come to us, and I would say our act, and certainly from my experience at Lambda Legal, the Human Rights Act in Illinois is the best in the country. I mean, I don't think there's many that would disagree across the country about that, unless you're on the other side of the political spectrum. But it's one of the most comprehensive acts that have evolved over time, and then something, and again, Joyce, I hate to keep complimenting you, but it's like there's something instilled in the agency that I believe everyone has shared that's been in my position and in our staff, which is it's a real sacred responsibility to protect that act. And so when it is threatened by someone that seeks to do harm, to create an exemption, we work very hard to make sure that doesn't happen, that we understand the foundation of why that's in place. It's rooted in the Civil Rights Act from the 60s. And when someone's trying to do something good for the act, that actually almost takes more time because it's a complicated document. And it's like anything that sort of evolves over time. Like and so sometimes it feels like it's sort of pieced together, and things are added. And so when someone wants to expand the act, like I think Mona mentioned the source of income for housing, which is huge. Like if you get a Section 8 voucher, or you get a voucher because you're disabled, or people got vouchers during COVID and they would be denied housing because people didn't want to take those vouchers. There was a group of activists that wanted to add that protection. And we're like, come to us. Like, we want to add that too. So work with us. We will help figure out how to make sure that we can implement and do this. And what's so amazing in that particular protection, which was just added a year ago, is we're finding that people don't have to come to the department to enjoy the success of that law. That they're contacting Hope Housing out in the northern suburbs of the Shriver Center here in Chicago, and they're just able to say, like, my landlord isn't honoring this, and you can just get a strongly worded letter from one of their lawyers, and the landlord's like, I didn't realize that was the law, welcome to the apartment. And so there's so much we can do, but it's to the great credit of the directors before me, we have worked very hard to protect that document as, to me, as outside of our state constitution, the most sacred document that Illinois has.
And thank you so much for doing so. I know as an Illinois resident, I appreciate you, and thank you for that.
It's an honor.
Last question, we're running out of time, and we've all touched upon it briefly, but I'd love to leave our conversation today with more of a sense of hope and fostering community. So given the current tensions across our country and the world, how can all of the different communities come together to build a world that is free from discrimination?
I think we start with the conversation. I think we come together as individuals and as organizations, and we communicate with each other. I think we have to make the commitment to make it better. We can moan and we can complain and we can point the finger, but if we want to make things different, and everybody says that we have to be the change that we want to see. So therefore, we have to emulate the behavior that we want to see. We have to join with those individuals who are going through the problems. We have to support them. And we have to try to solve it. You know, this is a problem. How do we solve this problem? Not how we complain about it.
Mhm.
What can we do to make it different? And that's going to take the collective minds and the collective hearts and the commitment of all of us.
I'll let Director Bennett talk about the helpline that he was able to secure funding for reporting hate crimes. But one of the things I think when you talk about a sacred responsibility, I think it's incumbent on us to assure all residents, all people who visit, all people who come and work, that the government is here to serve you, and that we are all civil servants, and we are here to serve you, to honor your life, and to help enforce the civil rights so that you can be a full contributing member to the state of Illinois. So I think it's about engaging, being respectful, and supporting our institutions. You know, it's very, we need to hold on to the systems that are currently working, make sure that they're not denigrated, and that we continue to support them. And I know that everybody at the Illinois Human Rights Commission views that as a sacred responsibility to serve all our community members. But the newest addition is the resurrection of the Commission on Discrimination and Hate Crimes, which I'm very honored to be a part of. But I'll toss it to Jim so he can talk about all the great stuff that he's been able to help foster.
Oh, thanks. I definitely agree. Like, to speak up, I have a great. I'm very thankful for this generation coming up. I think they're the most accepting generation we've ever had, and they, they have been voting. You know, we can look at who we have voted in Illinois and across the country. You know, I mean, they're holding the democracy in place. But it's hard. It's the Hate Crimes Commission. We relaunched it in towards the end of 2021, and it's 21 commissioners. They're appointed by the governor and Senate confirmed. As well as we can, they represent all the protected classes of the act and who's covered by the hate crimes laws, and they're people that are I think the world of them. They're people that represent a specific community, but they work very hard to look up and out and find the threads that connect all of us, and to figure out how we keep conversations going. And that leads to Joyce's point of having conversations. Like, although I'm glad people are tuned into social media for watching this, I think, like, get off your computer, get off your phone, and go talk to someone you may not agree with. We're all coming up on the holidays, and we're going to have that relative that torments us. Like, go talk to them and try to find that common ground. And I think if you ask more questions as opposed to telling your opinion, you have an opportunity to learn. And the Department of Human Rights and the Hate Crimes Commission will be launching a helpline we're calling it a soft launch in March of 2024, with a much larger one in September. And people will be able to contact us if they've experienced a hate crime or if they know someone that has, and we'll work with them to how to file. The basic answer is call 911, go to your law enforcement, but we'll work to make sure that law enforcement's understanding it and taking it seriously, and then providing the trauma-informed care. So and that's the same with our agency. When you're coming to our agency, or if you're coming to this line, you could have lost your house, you could have lost your job, you were diminished, and that diminishes a whole community. And so our job is to help make people whole again, and to help enforce these laws. And even when we don't find discrimination, or we don't have enough, the commission may not find enough there to legally take that case. You've put an employer on notice. You've put a landlord on notice. They've gone through an investigation, and they're now keenly aware of the laws and what can happen. And so there's good that comes from all of this. But there's a lot of great people out there, and our goal over the next 3 years in life, I guess, is to build this army of good and make sure that the majority of people that want to do the right thing are heard, and their voices are heard, and they matter.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you to each of you for really bringing your full selves and sharing your words with us all, and for the love it's so clear that you put into this work. Grateful for that, and just gratitude to each of you. And I pray that as the holiday seasons and 2024 starts, that the threads that do connect us all just continue to get stronger, and that we do work towards building this world that is free from discrimination. I'm going to pass it over to Demoya to close.
Hey, Sufjan, thank you for your work, because
Oh.
you're right out there in the trenches too. So I'm very thankful for you.
Thank you, Sufjan. Thank you.
Victoria?
Hey, Victoria, we're not able to hear you.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello. Thank you, Sufjan. Thank you, everyone. My name is Demoya Gordon, and I serve as a commissioner on the Illinois Human Rights Commission. I want to thank all of our speakers today for this uplifting conversation and for inspiring us all to recommit to the ongoing project of safeguarding everyone's right to freedom from discrimination. I also want to thank all who contributed to organizing this event, with a special thanks to the department's Director of Public Affairs and Public Information Officer, Victoria Villalpando. And if you would like more information about the Illinois Human Rights Act's protections or about the department's and the commission's work, please visit the landing page for this event. You can find a link to that page in the chat, and a recording for this event will also be made available on the landing page. So please feel free to rewatch it and to share it with your networks. That brings us to the end of today's program. Thank you all for joining us, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.